Okay, so does anyone have anything they'd like to share this morning or ask any questions?
Yes. Thank you for taking us on this most awesome journey of the Dantian breathing. It has been most fantastic. And I just want to share a real quick experience today with it, where it felt like you had us become aware of the point, the Dantian point, and kind of like just become aware of it and kind of become one with it. And like where the light was, feeling the light. And it was really interesting just having my awareness there. It felt like I became one with it. And it felt like as I became one with it, what was surprising is how vast and spacious I felt. Like it was like becoming, it felt really like opposite extremes. It was like as it went in, then one, it felt like a atom, like where it's like where it itself is like comprised of space, or mostly space. So I felt like as I was in it and one with it, I was like space. But then also as I was one with it, it allowed naturally like my awareness to extend out a lot more easily. I felt like as the one point was clear, like the extension was a lot easier and really spacious. So that was really cool. And then it felt like it naturally kind of became pulse breathing, like where I was feeling the pulse, but it felt like from that one point, it felt like my body and my energy was breathing, but it felt like also my field was breathing and like inhaling, contracting with it. And that was really cool because it felt like I wasn't having to do anything. It was like that was just the natural breath that came with that. And then it felt like there was some blockage in my middle dantian, and it felt like it was kind of like showing me that I need to release that. So I just let that release, and that was a release. It felt like then the dantian could actually open in the way it wanted to, and the chi could go up the central channel and like up to the heavens and things like that. And so it just made me really appreciate having a focal point, because in the process of being aware of the dantian, like everything else kind of like opened around it, if that makes sense. Where I felt like if I hadn't had that, it wouldn't have happened. So now I just wanted to thank you for the awesome journey and what you, the direction you took us today, and just share the experience.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's it's the journey of self-discovery, it's like I want to say it's like, no, we think it is, right? It's like it's like you didn't say this, but you basically got to see things more clearly, right? Kind of
Yes,
like,
totally.
yeah, right. It's like, so it's kind of like, which means that you were not seeing things from the vantage point you had before, which is the obvious thing to say. I mean, of course you had a different vantage point, right? But I don't think we understand the significance of what that means, which is that we weren't seeing the world as accurately as we could because of our own observations.
Mm.
But we don't understand that the observations are as subtle as it is. Like, say, for instance, that it's happening, that the observations are happening because we're not as spacious, that when things are more compacted, that we don't see things as clearly. We don't think that that's an issue because it doesn't seem to impede our lives daily from a day-to-day perspective. But but it has a certain tendency, a certain direction towards fear. And we don't realize that that's subtle. And it's kind of interesting because that subtle tension when nothing scary is happening, it seems okay because it doesn't bother us. But the tension is there. And then when something scary happens, then it tenses a lot and becomes really uncomfortable. And we call those emotions like when our organs tense, according to Chinese medicine, the meridians, the 12 meridians govern, a certain aspect of our experience, right? And so the heart, governs joy, but then it can also become unbalanced. It can actually, experience depression, and basically the lack of, it's like a sense of abandonment, if you will, because like joy is a sense of what happens when there's connection. And then the lungs, it's there for, a sense of pride and dignity. And then when you don't feel that, when you don't feel that sense of worth, that sense, then you feel depressed and sad, and so on and so forth. And so these organs, they're actually there, which governs a certain aspect of experience. And we don't think of it from that perspective. But so let's say, for instance, if you have a heart that's a bit tenser, then your general experience is going to be it's going to have a higher tendency for you to feel abandoned or have that fear of it. And so we don't realize that these slight tensions kind of predispose us to see things from a certain light. If your lungs are obstructed, then we don't realize that we have a tendency to fall into the sadness, depression, and things like that. We don't realize that if our liver is tense, we tend to fall into anger, and so on and so forth. And so not having this perspective, we don't realize the impact of these smaller tensions that we have, because when things are fine, it doesn't seem to impact us in any way. And so, you had an experience of spaciousness where your awareness naturally fell into your dantian point, and you got to see things more from a place of oneness, which is actually the actual reality, the experience, that we have when we experience oneness. And so, anyways, I just kind of wanted to just say that because I feel like this is an important exploration, because we don't realize that it's these subtleties, these observations or these tensions that we hold within ourselves, for self-protection, actually, for good reason, that is actually the cause of a lot of our pain. And this is actually traditionally what is actually referred to as karma. And that's why, it says that it's difficult for a person to see what their karma is or their pattern is, because it's actually that relationship that we have with ourselves, with our own, if you will, system. I don't want to just say organs, because it's really more than that, because you have the chakras, and then you have the meridians, and so our system is more complex than just our organs. But essentially, depending on the relationship you have with your organs, if you will, or your system, in the manner that we were talking about, it's going to impact the way you see things. And the clearer you see things, of course, the more you can be in harmony, because you're not going to be doing things that are ineffective due to your lack of, because you, instead of acting out of fear, you're going to be actually responding to what's actually going on. So this is very different from having an intellectual understanding of this. And what I mean by that is actually what I just talked about is actually not uncommon knowledge. People talk about it all the time, actually, on the internet. And but I think the more difficult thing is, can a person do it? And what does the actual practice of it look like? And does a person know what it feels like? And it doesn't look like what people think it does, because it doesn't look calm. It doesn't look dignified. It doesn't look, like stoic. It doesn't look stoic at all, actually. And it's kind of interesting because one of the things that the classics talk about, especially, if you read Tao Te Ching and how a master is described, it basically says that a person goes through stages where first they look unhealthy and crazy, and then they look like supernatural, like, something incredible, and then they go back to looking crazy and unhealthy.
That is awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome, actually. So if you look at the descriptions of all the masters, it's actually rare. It's actually not uncommon, like where you don't actually get to read about a master that's just looking all balanced and all like serene and all that. There are descriptions of those masters too, but actually, especially in the Taoist lore, if you read the descriptions of the eight immortals, they're not. Those are not people that you'd actually look up to. And you'll find out that oh, this is not what I thought, what it will be in terms of the heroes, of, and I think that's really great because, it shows that the path is authenticity, and it shows that the path is that of, self-acceptance, and that, that's what's actually most important, that this is not about becoming this perfect person. And that's actually what I love about the messages. It's not about perfectionism or, becoming perfect where you can fit in everywhere, but actually just learning to become more and more comfortable with, what yourself. But anyways, so just wanted to comment on the experience that you're describing, because I feel like it's such a powerful demonstration in this, how powerful subtle experiences can be, and like just seeing it within the proper context can really give life to the rest of practice, and through you of, oh wow, so this is how my view has been obstructed and I didn't even know it. Oh, okay, so this is what reality actually looks like when I'm not coming from a place of fear. It's like, oh wow, okay, I have a lot more fear than I realized. And it's like, okay, it's like, how can I take care of my fear? How can I take care of my system? How can I love it more? Because, it's like if you have fear by trying to discipline it or trying to get it to do what you want it to do, you can actually succeed in doing that. I think that's the issue. You can get your system to do what you want. And I think that's what so many people attempted, because it was built into us for us to be able to do those things due to survival. Self-understanding is not a emergency priority. Survival is. Self-understanding is a happiness priority, which is a long-term priority. And so, if you've got as I always joke about, if you've got a TRex chasing after you, then you're not going to be
You're not
wondering
listening
about,
to a
yeah,
Brene Brown TED talk at that point.
yeah, you're not exactly. Yeah. So anyway, so I just wanted to just say that because, it's like oftentimes we have these amazing experiences and then that's what it becomes. And then we want to get back to this amazing experience because we want to be happy, but we don't realize actually what it really showed was what reality looks like, and also where we're holding our fears. And I feel like that's just invaluable to see that.
Thank you so much. That was so awesome. And I feel like that gave me a new perspective on like small is great, because like, I feel like as you were tying it to the very kind of like way we perceive the world and our kind of framework of experience, it feels like, there's kind of like, in a way, nothing smaller than that. It's like it's so subtle. It seems like it would be inconsequential or not a big deal, but it's like the very framework upon which we experience everything. And like seeing it as not like, it's the experience, but what that experience shows about how we perceive things, and just the power of becoming aware of that. I feel like that's just really inspiring.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a good discussion, actually. You know, um, it's that it's kind of like, I used to, I've been teaching all this in terms of incremental improvement. And I was wondering, why is incremental improvement never satisfying to people? Why is it? And I realized that it's actually because it's inaccurate. It's only partially accurate. I realized that we're actually not looking for an incremental improvement. It's actually better to say we're actually setting up for it's kind of like a chess game where you're setting up your pieces for a certain perspective of the board, so that you set up so that you can see better. You set up so that you can, win, have a better chance and more options. You're actually not, if you look at it from a moment to moment, each moment could be seen as a gambit where you're trying to win or lose. But actually, if you're a good chess player, you will set up, each move leads to a greater move that's going to come later. And these experiences, they add up for a greater experience later. And so having that perspective, I feel like it's really important, because we think in terms of incremental improvement, but it's so painful because we don't really know what that means. And oftentimes when we're doing these things, we don't get any results. And if we're looking for immediate results, that means that already we're looking for a gambit, like we're trying to win in that moment. But it's actually a different game altogether, if you will.
So
It's where you.
go ahead.
Let's go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so it sounds like, if I understand what you're saying, it's kind of actually more looking at it from a perspective of superior position, superior opportunity. It's kind of like, it's not just, there's like, it's like, okay, you put money in, the stock market and you're having an advantage now, but that actually accumulates over time. And that actually gives you further opportunities down the line, because there's the opportunity that you wouldn't be able to capture if you hadn't actually done that. So you're setting yourself up. So there's the change you're having now, plus the cascading effect of that over time down the timeline, if I understand what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah, you're correct. It's basically just having a broader view of life, instead of just moment to moment, where you realize that what you're doing is you're actually setting up it's kind of like being able to see it from a broader perspective, seeing how these accumulate for you to have, where you're setting up your life to have the life experience you want, and seeing how it all comes together. Because otherwise you become myopic and you just look at this moment. Is this moment going to work or not? But if you get to see it from a broader perspective, you get to see it from, okay, I can see how this is going to add up with this, and then I'm going to be able to have this.
That is really helpful. I feel like that's really helpful. I feel like it makes me think of like off by an inch, off by a mile. like I've thought about that as being off part, but I realize it actually works the same way in your favor.
Yes.
Like if you like, I thought, okay, if you're off by an inch, then it ends up being a mile down the line. But in the same way, if you move it by an inch, then a mile down the road you have, or farther down the road you have a mile of improvement. So it works. It's a non-dual thing. It works both ways.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's why the non-dual teaching is so important, because your perspective is really only balanced when you can see the entirety of it.
That makes sense.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Okay, does anyone else have any other questions or anything else they'd like to share?
This is Mr. DeSena, if I can sneak in.
Yes.
Thank you for the Dantian teaching today. It was really helpful. It's interesting because, so I have a sharing and then another question that's kind of random that I just wanted to get in real quick. But the sharing is that I think last night, actually, when I was doing Dantian breathing, for the first time, I could really feel it was like swirling. Not even swirling, it was like it almost felt like energy kind of moving randomly, but swirling around that whole area. And
Yeah.
moving
Like kind of like churning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The feeling, it almost felt like wisps of energy that were just sort of
Yeah.
It was moving then into my Mingmen, and I could feel my Mingmen probably for the first time. And then I really felt it like sort of filling my whole body. It was almost like I could feel it expanding into my whole body. And it felt like I needed a lot of time. I mean, I was doing this for over an hour last night. And so today I couldn't quite, I couldn't sort of replicate it. And I realized I can't really try to. But it didn't feel light last night, but it did feel like the feeling of the energy was filling my whole body. And then I could feel sort of one point where I could feel it felt like I was in the Dantian, because it was sort of surrounding, it just grew to the point where it was surrounding my consciousness. But I didn't experience light, so to speak, like I do when I do the pressurized breathing or whatever. So that was my sharing.
Oh, thank you. That's really good. Yeah, the light doesn't have to be there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't really have a question. I try to trust the process. I wanted to share that. I do have another question that's completely unrelated. That's just a question.
Okay.
About the Gold Series.
Yeah. Go ahead.
At the very end, when after the source breathing, and then you do the second circle, and then there's that point where you have your hands sort of like in a prayer, mudra, and you do Dantian, Dantian, and then you do something in the middle, and then you do Tian Mun.
Yes.
What is the one in the middle? I don't know that word.
Zhongdan. Zhong means zhongdan. So zhong means middle. Dan is the word for dantian. So it's like the dantian in the middle, and so that's your heart.
Oh, okay. It sounds like Yut Sun or something. Maybe this.
You're talking about the third circle. Yutsun.
Yeah.
Yutsun means jade bed. And it's basically the spot at the back of your head that's the most prominent.
Oh.
It's actually the part that hits the pillow. That's why it's called jade bed. What's the word for it? And so you're basically receiving the energy from that place.
Got it. And so the jade pillow and the jade bed are two separate things?
It's the same thing.
Okay. So that's right. Is that sort of right at the base of the skull? You feel almost like a bulging feeling.
Yes, that is correct.
That's the J pillar. Okay. Okay, so that's the second one. Got it. Okay, that's helpful.
Good, good, good. Very good.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you. Sue.
thank you for sharing and thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
So now I am done cleaning, so I need to get going here. So I need to bid you farewell. Thank you for the questions and have fun clearing your observations. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Master Kim.
Thank you, Master Kim.
Thank you, Master
Welcome.
Kim.
Thank you, Master.
Welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.